Hi, Hollis Taylor. Really nice to see you again. And I just wanted to have a little chat to you today about your practice with Birdsong in light of the piece that you recently wrote for us for Ensemble Offspring for our Songbirds CD. And the first question that I would like to ask is, where were you born? Where did you grow up? And what led you to come to Australia?
Okay, well, I'm from Portland, Oregon,
Yeah.
and my mother was a piano teacher, and her mother, who lived with us, was a terrific pianist who taught both piano and violin. Um, I played in the Oregon Symphony when I was young, and I got a degree in violin performance. But early in my career, I think really what you need to know about me is that I gravitated to music largely learned via the oral tradition, including South Indian classical music. And when I became the Oregon State Fiddle Champion, I really began transcribing the American vernacular in earnest: old time, Western swing, Texas fiddling,
Wow.
swing
What
jazz, and
what
bebop.
is the Oregon State Fiddle Champion? What is that?
Well, each state has sort of their own competition and their own style. So that's what I entered and became, sort of propelled my career. The funny thing about that, Claire, was that um, I'm not the kind of person that really enjoys learning by ear. I really like to read music. So
Yeah.
in order to do that, I had to transcribe all of these genres: Caribbean, pop music. I lived in Eastern Europe for a while and transcribed the music of a lot of those cultures while I lived in Budapest. So um, I don't make a claim that I mastered all of those, but my ear was really accustomed to assessing and notating new musical idioms.
Yeah, wow. And so what was the timeline of then coming to Australia?
Well, my first trip to Australia was in 2001. And that was just a visit. And I had an epiphany. There's no other way to describe it. I was at Wilgarno Station near Mount Magnet in WA, and a trio of pied butcherbirds completely enchanted me with their song. I didn't know birds sang in trios. And so I really wanted to know more about their song, what they were up to. I wasn't so much like, oh, I could write that down and improve on it. I was like, what are they doing? It just seemed extraordinary. So then my partner, Jon Rose, and I moved here full time in 2002, and I began to study them full time in 2005.
Wow, that's so amazing. So would you say then that that epiphany with the trio of birds, of pied butcherbirds, was what sort of then led you on the journey to really dedicating more of your life to understanding birdsong and
Oh, yes, absolutely. It
yeah.
completely changed my life. And so now I record about 3 to 4 months each year, mostly in Central Australia and also North Queensland. And when I look back, I see how all of my previous musical encounters, recording and transcribing other genres, have set me up for what I'm doing now, because I was used to getting knocked back to square one with a new genre, or now a new species, or in the case of pied butcherbirds, really a new bird, because they all sing differently and they
Yeah.
change their solo songs, which are nocturnal, annually. So
Wow. And so what's the process involved when you say you record for 3 to 4 months a year? Can you take us through a day of what that would actually sort of be like for you when you are recording?
yeah, so it's more like a night because
Yeah.
they're singing nocturnally. So uh, I will say I'm in Alice Springs. I usually stay in town. Sometimes I camp out, but I usually stay in town, and then I'll get up, depending on when the birds are starting. I'll get up at 1 or 2 and drive to where I need to be very slowly, because you don't want to hit a kangaroo or any other, an owl or anything. And I have now sites that I pretty much know where hopefully the birds will be. They don't always sing if they're in drought. You have to be very patient. They may not sing a lot, and they may not sing at all. Uh, but if they are singing, I'll set up my microphones where I hope they'll be, and I may have to move. So it's in the dark. It can be scary. I have way too many stories of other animals, of five guys trying to rob me a couple of years ago. So there's a lot that it's not just the birds, but then, you know, the sun comes out, the bird is sung beautifully, and it's all been worth it.
Yeah, wow. That must be quite an experience. I have heard over the years, obviously with the collaborations that we've been doing, but I'm so intrigued by the process. It sounds really, really unique. So going back to your practice, I noticed that you've written about the untapped tools of musicology in birdsong studies. And I was just wondering if you could sort of extrapolate on why you see those as untapped and what that means to you.
Sure. Well, the songs of birds, of course, have long inspired and enthralled listeners and from all walks of life. But the technological advances like wax cylinders, discs, magnetic tape, etc., really allowed biologists without any kind of musical training to capture and study bird vocalizations. And musicologists, who you would think would have really the training, the trained ear, and and all of the methodological toolkit to really do this, have all but avoided the subject of birdsong. Now, that's not to say that composers haven't been inspired, but really very few have committed to a longitudinal study, and that's what I decided to do, and why I'm a bit of an oddball and an exception. So I see myself as a sonic explorer, and these birds have been singing for millions of years. So it's an unbelievably ancient continuum of melody.
And actually, that reminds me that I know you've mentioned before about how the birds have a different song every year, every season, but they're also ancient melodies because they've been singing for so long. So how do you see that continuum? Like what, if they're old songs, obviously they just slightly morph and change every year, but what sort of changes them? Is it the weather patterns? Is it?
Yeah, a good question, Claire. So they're really combinatorial. So they're we could think of them the way we think of minimalist composers like Steve Reich and Philip Glass. They're taking little bits, little motifs, and recombining them in different ways. And so they will have their favorite and their habitual motifs that change over the years, so that bum bum may become the next year bum bum bum, or bum bum bum, you know. So that's the way that they might start to change things, but then they'll come up with something that seems really very novel and new. So you really I don't think that you can say that we've got what they were singing millions of years ago. I would expect it to have been changed. And they've been on the planet for about 13 million years, so long tradition.
And how is it that we know that?
Well, we've got some fossil remains that show us that the pied butcherbird broke off from the Currawong about 13 million years ago. So we don't know exactly when they, you know, what they were singing like, of course, but we do know that they've been around a lot longer than us.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. So I just wanted to ask you as well about your collaboration with Jon Rose, your partner. I've always wanted to know how you two met and how long you've been together, and also I guess it's sort of pretty obvious what sparked your musical, synergy, but I'd just like to know more about that, because I have quite a close relationship with both of you together and separately. And I know you as a couple, but I don't know much about your relationship or the history of it.
Well, we met in Berlin, where I went to interview him for an article. So the first 3 hours that we knew each other are all on tape. And we were colleagues for a number of years before we got together, maybe 6 years. So when we got together, we lived in Paris for a year, and then we moved to Sydney in 2002. And I think a lot of people think, oh, both violinists were home, playing duets together or something. But actually, we've made a point of not working together, with one big exception, the Great Fences of Australia project, which was a collaboration, although he had done it, he'd begun it years before, but we did that project together and traveled around the country bowing fences. And now, of course, we're working together again on the Birdsong project. And a lot of the way that we do it, I mean, I don't always work with him. I sometimes more often work by myself, but when we work together, he takes my recordings that I've transcribed and begins from there. And often we as we've done with you, we'll do the piece together as well.
Yeah, wow. Well, I have to say it does strike me as quite a collaborative process, like working on Bitter Springs Creek 2014 with you both. Yeah, it really feels like you both give, I think, quite different things to the sort of project, but two very important elements as well. And I really love that about these collaborations. The trio is, I guess, the second kind of piece that I've worked on with you. And then now most recently, we've been working on Dalrymple, which is a marimba solo, which I have to say I really love. That is a very special melody that bird is singing.
Yes, that's a Queensland bird.
Wow.
And that's, yeah. They're all just amazing. I mean, it's tricky because that bird, for instance, is sort of in town, in Charters Towers. And so it's not always easy to get a really high quality recording in town, although it helps that it's pre-dawn, because then there's less human activity.
And do you get to feel like you sort of know these birds personally over time, or?
Yes, I do. And when they, I assume, die because they aren't migratory. So when they do die and another bird has replaced them in the territory, it's always sad, oh, that one, because he was so great for, certain birds. I really have favorites.
Yeah, well, I find the whole thing so intriguing, and I have to say it's been a real pleasure talking to you about the whole process today and your practice, and I hope we get to do it again really soon.
Thank you, Claire, and it's a treat for us to have you realize these bird songs on the vibes and on a marimba. It's always a great treat to hear your music.